Hello everybody, and welcome to my guide to how the guild I'm in defeats Lord Greenscale in the Greenscale's Blight raid instance. Lord Greenscale is the fifth and final boss of the instance, and the most difficult fight of the bosses here. It requires good coordination and awareness by all raid members throughout most of this reasonably long fight. This fight needs two tanks, one for the boss and the other for the plants that spawn. If the adds in the air phase are posing a problem, then a third tank could be used, but this should not be necessary. For the main tank we normally use a rogue, as their abilities allow them to handle the noxious fumes the best with minimal life resistance. A warrior or cleric with 200 or more life resistance would also be a good choice for this fight. We have a dedicated healer on them, which is normally a purifier build cleric. We also have a secondary healer assigned to them, who also keeps the second tank topped up throughout the fight. This is due to Greenscale placing a debuff on the main tank that drastically reduces the amount of healing they receive throughout the fight. For the second tank we will normally use a Void Knight Spect warrior with 200 plus death resistance. The job of this tank is to kill the plants that Greenscale spawns. There are 3 pools around the outside of the area. If you go into these, you get a stacking debuff that damages you and also any plants that are near you. The second tank should get this debuff at the beginning and focus solely on killing the plants that spawn. Void Knights are particularly suited for this, as they can remove the stacks of the debuff, but they're not the debuff itself with their abilities. If you use a Void Knight for this role, then no one should cleanse them throughout the entire fight. If you have to use a different type of tank, then someone needs to be assigned to cleanse them when the debuff gets too high. They will then have to run to one of the pools to regain it. As long as this tank stacks a lot of death resist, the amount of damage they take should be very little, and they should mostly be kept alive with the raid healing. Along with the 2 healers for the tanks, we use 4 or 5 raid healers, as raid damage can be pretty heavy at times during this fight. The rest of the raid should be pretty equally split between ranged and melee DPS. This fight starts off reasonably straightforward, with Greenscale adding more abilities with each air phase. Your main tank should pick up the boss and immediately face him away from the raid. Greenscale has a cleave and breath attack, but he doesn't have a tail swipe. After several seconds, Greenscale will cast Strangling Blight, which will summon some plants in the raid. These do short-ranged AoE damage, so people should move out of them. They should be killed off by the plants tank quickly. Greenscale will then cast Noxious Vapours, which is his breath attack. The main tank should use cooldowns for this, as it hits quite hard. Greenscale will just use his abilities until his health reaches 75% and he enters his first air phase. Greenscale will take to the air and move to one of the corners opposite to a pool. He is DPSable during this time, so DPS should continue attacking him. Once in position, he will begin casting Genesis Torrent. This will do AoE damage to the raid every few seconds that needs to be healed up. When he starts casting this, adds will spawn in the pool opposite. We have the main tank pick them up and bring them to underneath Greenscale. The pool which the adds spawn from can no longer be used by the plants tank to get the debuff that kills plants. Care should be taken with the adds, as they will cleave. One of them will jump to a random raid member shouting "Shank" and hit them before returning to the tank. The mender will cast heals and should be interrupted and killed quickly. The tank will also be knocked back while he is tanking the adds, so DPS and healers need to be careful of the cleave when they are moved back into position. These adds should be killed quickly, as if Greenscale finishes his channel of Genesis Torrent while some of them are still alive, he will do damage to them as well, significantly healing him for each tick of the damage he does. This should be avoided as much as possible. When the Annihilator, which is the largest add, is killed, he will leave a white pulsing bubble behind. All the raid should try to be inside this, otherwise the AoE damage from Greenscale will most likely kill them. Care should be taken though, as from the first air phase, Greenscale will also start spawning exploding mushrooms. These will do damage and knock back any people near them after a few seconds when they spawn. This can knock you out of the bubble if they are growing as the bubble spawns. Once the bubble is active on the ground though, any that spawn inside it will not do the knockback. DPS can continue on Greenscale from inside the bubble, which is why we bring the adds to under him so melee can still attack him. Greenscale will then land and do the same as his earlier ground phase, along with spawning the exploding mushrooms. DPS and healers should take care when he lands that they are not going to get hit by the cleave or breath attack, and they should hold off on DPS until the tank positions him correctly. This will happen until he reaches 50% health, when he will go into his second air phase. This air phase is the same as the first, so just kill the adds as before, and if your plant tank is not a Void Knight, they should note which will be the only remaining pool they can pick the debuff up from. When Greenscale lands again, he will be able to spawn another type of plant. This time he will add Noxious Bracken to his repertoire. This is probably the most dangerous of the plant spawns. It does damage to anyone near it, along with slowing them. People should try to move as Greenscale casts Strangling Blight, as both Bracken and the original plants can spawn under someone at the same time, and this will do a very large amount of damage, possibly even killing them. We have ranged DPS target any Noxious Bracken and kill it off quickly. This will continue until Greenscale reaches 25% health, when he will enter his last air phase. This is the most difficult of the air phases. The adds will spawn as before, and Greenscale will continue to summon the Noxious Bracken. People should try not to stand directly under the boss if possible during the phase, until the Annihilator is killed, to minimise the chance of Noxious Bracken spawning where you want to kill the adds. If it does spawn here, it should be killed quickly, or if you have a warrior tank, they can use abilities such as Sergeant's Order to move the Bracken somewhere safe. Greenscale will also start spawning pollen during this air phase. This should be killed quickly when it spawns, otherwise it will buff Greenscale's damage similar to the pollen in the Oracle Ilaria fight. We have melee DPS AoE cleave this when it spawns, with ranged DPS taking care of any that spawn in Noxious Bracken. Greenscale will land for the final time at the end of this air phase, and the rest of the fight will be pretty hectic. We have the tank pick up Greenscale when he lands, and begin to slowly move Greenscale around the room. Plants, mushrooms, bracken and pollen will all continue to spawn during this phase. Pollen should always be killed off quickly when it spawns. Your plant tank should continue to kill off the plants that spawn, and continue to move bracken out of the way if possible. Ranged DPS should help with any pollen that melee can't kill, but mainly should be DPSing the boss while moving out of plants and bracken. The boss should be kept moving in this phase to lessen the amount of plants and bracken that need to be killed or moved. Healers should make sure they keep the tank in range for healing at all times, and they should be careful when the boss needs to be turned at the corners. As long as DPS can be kept at a reasonable level on the boss in the final phase, while managing all the things spawning, then this boss should then fall. Thank you for watching. I've been Zero Override, and I wish you luck with this boss.